Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Policy Pod. I'm very thrilled today to have with us Miss Natasha Zarine as a guest on Policy Pod. Natasha is someone who has a very varied background in the public policy and development space, and I'm very happy to have her here today. Natasha currently is the managing director and also the co-founder of Ecosatva and Carpe. Carpe stands for Center for Applied Research and People Engagement, which is based out of Maharashtra but works with other governments as well. Her academic background is something which is astonishing. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology, she has a degree in law, and she has been a Young India Fellow as well. Uh, and so is her career journey and professional journey, where she has been a resident naturalist in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, has worked with the Clinton Health initiatives, and has also worked with various not-for-profits across Maharashtra and other parts of the country before starting her entrepreneurial journey with Ecosatva. Welcome, Natasha. We are very happy to have you here with us.
Thank you, Ayush. Thank you. I'm really glad to be here too. Thanks.
Yeah. Natasha, I have introduced you a little bit in terms of what have you been doing and everything, but before we go on further, we would love to know in your words your career journey and a little bit about yourself.
Oh, okay. All right. So I think you've said most of it, and you've been very kind in your introduction of me. So maybe I'll go back a little further and say that I grew up on a small farm in along the coast of Maharashtra, and in a little, actually not even in a village, outside a village, small village along the coast, and I think that was a very important part of how why I'm here doing what I'm doing. I grew up amongst like the environment, being very close to the earth. Trees, planting food. I saw it grow, and I also saw waste. Right, how waste can be um, composted and reused, or how it can be dumped and create a mess, like it did in one part of the village. And then when I went to the town, it would be a bigger mess. And then when I came to Mumbai, it was quite shocking. So similarly with our rivers and water bodies and ponds that we were so close to, right? We used to even go swimming in ponds, and then you suddenly find that there's sewage coming in, so it starts to stink, and you wonder why this is the way it is. Similarly with other issues, my best friends were the kids of the people working at the farm, and I used to go to their homes, which was quite amazing. But you come face to face with people who have so very little materially and financially, but so very much emotionally to give. And then also the difference between us, not as people but as the material possessions that we had, kind of was stark, and really, I think, moved me, in fact, when I was a kid. And I also saw the gender dynamic and all things like that, in very close quarters, growing up. So I think that was a big influence in my life. I knew that growing up I wanted to work on these issues, or build solutions, but I didn't know what to call that. How what kind of a career would that be? Would it be something in law? Would it be something in biological sciences? What would it be? There was really no guidance or direction in that, but I knew that that's the space I wanted to work in. And growing up, going to school and then college and all, it still wasn't getting clearer. I landed up studying psychology. Then I went to the Andaman Islands and I thought law. And I was quite confused, and I kept feeling like everything was taking me further away from what I actually wanted to do, until it was the Young India Fellowship, where I got some real skills, like how do you conduct research, and how do you how do you write better, and how do you look at problems from their multiple dimensions and break them down. Basic skills that I really needed. And so when I moved to Aurangabad and found that the waste management problem was apparent, the water bodies were polluted, I think also the fellowship gave me a little experience of how I can work in teams, and how you need that little courage to kind of step out there and do something that may not be clear cut. And so that's how I just started working on ground, and that's where my journey began. And I met some wonderful people who have guided me along and had some great experiences. So yeah.
That sounds wonderful, and thank you for connecting us with the motivations you had uh, for joining the environment and sustainability sector, but also the journey of figuring it out. I want to talk a little bit more about because I understand that I think I had a similar journey where since school I wanted to be in the development sector. I wanted to work on delivery of public services, but again didn't know the medium, didn't know the avenues. And I also figured out through my undergraduate studies and postgraduate studies how to be able to do that. I'm still very intrigued by how did you even find the opportunity to be a resident naturalist in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and that's during your undergraduate studies. So how did you even manage to be there for a year, like just after your undergraduate studies? Though, how did you take a switch to be there, and what were the kind of learnings you had in probably your first ever job in the environment and sustainability sector?
Right, sure. So I was studying psychology and I quite enjoyed studying it. But I was also interning at a drug rehab treatment center and a psychiatric ward. And both experiences were quite shocking because what we were learning in our course versus what was actually happening in practice was very different and quite disturbing. And I wasn't sure that that was the battle I wanted to fight, I wasn't sure if trying to work on how mental health patients are treated in these hospitals or whatever. I somehow I knew that that wasn't my calling. So, and I wanted to, if I did want to study, I wanted it to be um, cognitive psychology, which wasn't really offered here in India. And anyway, so I was confused there, and I had a friend who was in the Andaman Islands, who I had met incidentally at the enduro adventure race. So I had done this weekend adventure race, cycling, kayaking, hiking. Kind of, it was a 2 day race. So near Pune, and Tasneem Khan, she was one of the organizers, and we became friends after that. And she was based in the Andaman Islands at the Andaman Nicobar Environment Team, ANET. And so she said, come, I can give you some volunteering opportunities. And since I was so confused about what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to do something in the environment space, just not quite sure what. And I didn't have a degree in zoology or botany or whatever that could connect me to conservation science. But I had a friend who was willing to take me on, so I left. Um, and I volunteered at Anet. One of the jobs was to climb these large paddock trees, like there are 80, 120 feet tall trees that you use jumars to kind of climb, and then to sit up there and note down. So the project was that they wanted to note what were the kinds of tree canopy species that existed only in tree canopies, and their whole lives were spent in tree canopies and they never came down. So had they been studied, etc. So there was a researcher who was doing that, and I was supposed to support and help him out. But I also needed to make money, so then I got a job with an eco resort. I mean, it called itself an eco resort, but less said about that, the better. So that's how I landed up in the Andaman Islands. And I was like the resident naturalist. My job was to find out trekking trails, kayaking trails to take people snorkeling and camping. to identify these places where I take them, sell the tour, and take them for it also, and kind of point out the Andaman gecko or the whatever the various flora and fauna of the area. So that was it was I loved it, but the management was horrible of the hotel, the resort that I was at, and I had to eventually leave. And we can discuss that in detail some other time. I don't know if it's appropriate for this podcast, but yeah, that's how I landed up in the Andaman Islands, and I had quite the experience there.
Wow, that's really fascinating. But I think before I move on further, I think another really fascinating or maybe even applaudable uh, thing is the how you set up Ecosatva and Carpe. I think it's almost 8 years now. You set it up in back in 2015. So I think our audience would also love to know about the work that you do at Ecosatva and Carpe and what has been the journey like for you from setting it up to now.
Sure. Sure. So when I moved into Aurangabad, like I said, I did try to shadow a few lawyers here, thinking maybe I should follow like a career in law. But again, I didn't like what I was seeing in practice, and it didn't feel like that was my thing, and that's kind of what I felt before while I was interning during law college as well. So, like I said, the challenge of garbage was quite apparent, waste management, and I decided to just like dive in and start looking at why this problem was here, identifying, shadowing the Safai Karmachari, seeing what he's doing, how he's collecting the waste, who is giving, who is not giving the waste, where does he take it, what kind of equipment is he using. Once he takes it and collects it and dumps it at this spot, then when is it being picked up, and when it's being picked up, where is it being taken, can I followed. And I have to say, I'm privileged enough that I didn't need to worry about paying the rent or whatever, so which is why I could do this. What I found was that there was a lack of a system. And then when I tried to speak to the elected representative of my ward, he said, "Oh, yeah, 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 I'll call the JCB and I'll solve your problem." And I knew that that wasn't going to solve my problem. It's just going to pick up that waste and take it somewhere else and dump it somewhere else once. It's not a solution. And so then I started looking for what are the best practices where, and at the fellowship I had, every chance I got, I kind of worked on the issue of waste management. So I understood the policy that was there, the municipal solid waste management rules of 2000, the Supreme Court judgment in Almitra Patel versus Union of India. So I kind of knew the background, and then now I was kind of getting a grip of what was happening on ground. And so I started I got in touch with Almitra Patel, and she was like, she was amazing, right? And she's been a mentor since. She gave me all her insights on what the challenge with waste management is and how it can be sorted, and she told me where some of the best practices were. So I went to different parts of the country. I went to Pune and Bangalore and Hyderabad, and you know uh, looked at what was happening in composting and plastic recycling and waste picker integration. And then at one of these conferences that I attended in Hyderabad, I was sitting next to a chief officer. At that time, I didn't even know who's a chief officer in the hierarchy of administrative services in state governments. And so he happened to be the chief officer of a town called Parakkal in uh, in Telangana. And while I was hearing on the conference that with all these guys with their fancy degrees talking about how this should be done and that should be done and whatever, making their presentations, and this guy's like, I've actually done all of this, and this is how it works and whatever. I was like, really? Can I see it? And he said, sure. And so literally we drove together to his town, which was some 60 kilometers away, and I saw how this small town of mostly agrarian, families were segregating their waste. There was a cart that was designed to collect it from people's homes. There was no waste outside. The drains were absolutely clear. The dry waste was then being, baled or bundled up and sold. The organics were being windrow composted. It was happening, and this gentleman had managed to do it, and was running well on its own. So he showed me what route maps are. He showed me how, and so that really, I think, that really gave me a direction and showed me what a waste management system needs to be in our, in our Indian city town kind of context. And so I came to Aurangabad. By this time I had already tried to find a partner, like Gauri Mirashi, um, via someone. I have to be grateful to social media for connecting us. And so Gauri and I then sought the time of the municipal commissioner here in Aurangabad. And that's a great part about being in a smaller or mid-sized city. You're closer to decision makers. Like in Mumbai, getting a meeting with the municipal commissioner is almost impossible. But here you could just, wait outside the office and meet him. So I met Dr. Kamble, Harshdeep Kamble, and explained our idea, and said that, we've studied all of this. We studied what's happening in Aurangabad. We studied best practice. Now we have a report for you, and we'd like to present it to you. And he was like, okay, fine. I'll give you whatever 30 minutes on, I remember, 15th of November, 2013. And so Gauri and I made this PPT with with all our findings, and we were like, okay, we have to finish this in 30 minutes. So 20 minutes and maybe 10 minutes for Q&A, whatever. And that meeting went on for 2 hours. He was most interested. So he also had a solid waste department, head there, and they said, all of this makes a lot of sense, um, and we like your ideas, but even if everyone in our department is to read your report, or you have to present this to everyone, it's not going to change a thing. So you're going to need to actually make this happen on ground. Can you do that? Can you like work on ground to show me in a pilot that all these concepts of routes, of fixed routes and segregation of waste and resource recovery are actually going to work? And so we were like, yeah, sure, of course, fair enough. We should be able to do it, and we should do it. And so we started in a neighborhood of 500 households. And that's where we, all the stuff that we had seen, we tried to apply, and we learned what works, what doesn't. And the field really taught us, it really gave us a clear view on where the gaps are, what is needed to set a system in place, who are the stakeholders really, what are their motivations. So from the Safai Karmachari to the resident, to the Badli worker, to the elected representative, the ward officer, the sanitary inspector, the waste picker, the guys who take away the organics for their piggeries, like we got a clear sense of what are all the various moving parts in the waste management system. And that's where we realized where the gaps were and how we'd fill them in. And like even a simple thing like we would get calls from the residents once we had set the system and got segregation and all of that. We told people, see, you need to not throw waste out at the street corners. We make sure that the waste collection comes to your doorstep every day, and you just have to give the waste in the segregated manner. And it took us a while so we learned what communication works best with residents. And once it was set, we realized that absenteeism is like 10 to 15%. So 10 to 15% of the time, Gauri and I would be going and pushing the push cart. And when you're pushing a push cart of 200 kilos of waste, then you know that if there's even a slight gradient and incline, then it's going to be really difficult to complete the route. So you set the route in such a way that that's why route mapping is important. So anyway, this is how we learned. And from that neighborhood, which worked really well, we kind of got a ward. And then after the ward, another thing we learned was our municipal commissioner got transferred. The new guy was least interested in anything. And this is all before Swachh Bharat, right? And before Swachh Bharat started to focus on waste. First, Swachh Bharat was focused on toilets till 2017. So then we got a neighboring town called Sidco Valuj, which we managed to fix. And that was an entire town that we could do. And it works beautifully to the day, the entire system. And then the head of Sitco Waluj became the head of Aurangabad Municipal Corporation, like the municipal commissioner. And then we worked across the city and then multiple other smaller cities and towns, all by word of mouth. And so when we started, it was just the two of us. And soon it kind of grew to 27, 28 people. We tried to register not for profit. It took forever, and it was a very daunting experience registering the Section 8 company. So in the meanwhile, we registered a partnership firm and started the work. And yeah, and that's how the journey began. And soon we realized that it's better to have a private limited. And so we also registered a private limited. And similarly, we worked on other civic and environmental challenges like green cover, our cities. We've been told since we were children, right, to plant trees and grow trees, but our urban spaces are not getting greener. So why not? And what can we do to change that? And so we worked similarly on green cover, similarly on water bodies, and actually a bunch of other projects and areas, but then we've kind of narrowed it down to these three. And we've developed what we call the BOTRAM process of municipal solid waste management systems transformation, which is an in-house thing, and which is what we also trained McKinsey.org in Argentina and in Bali on how to implement this, in Barrio 31 in Buenos Aires and Sanur Desa in Denpasar, and it works there. So what we learned on the ground in Vaijapur, Aurangabad, uh, it was so relevant and works across geographies, languages, and we could implement it in different continents even. So I'll stop here. I realize I've gone on for too long.
Wow. No,
Yeah.
no, that's wonderful to hear. Another question I have is what's the impact area currently across these three intervention areas that you have? What are the in Maharashtra and outside Maharashtra municipalities and other government bodies that you're working with?
Um, You mean how many government bodies are we working with? So we're working across a few districts, but in the districts we work with a few urban local bodies and
Okay,
villages. So it's different. We don't work across an entire district. So
okay,
we have a few districts in Maharashtra. We have one in Punjab, the Ludhiana district. Ludhiana town, city actually. And we
yeah.
also just finished a project in Palakkad in Kerala. So yeah.
That that's a wonderful, varied geographical reach from working across the country in these different towns and select
Mm.
urban bodies to helping other organizations or McKinsey in Argentina or Bali. That sounds wonderful, and I think one of the questions I have is how do you do that in terms of just given the kind of work that you're doing is very operations heavy and is like as the ground based work usually is, how do you scale up? How do you, from starting with one municipality, you went around with so many other different municipalities across geographical regions? How did you do that?
Yeah, so that is the tricky part, right? So we know that our solution works. We know that there's a demand across ULBs and districts and states. We know that there's a budget, like there's money available to to pay for the services. But how do you scale, and how fast do you scale, and how do you scales sustainably and effectively? That really is the question. And we've managed to scale so far, really project by project, really putting ourselves into everything, right? Like, and I think that's how we've managed so far, but now we have to scale beyond what we're doing. And that requires more human resources, dedicated human resources, people to really join this mission. And what I found is that that is the challenge: finding people who'll commit and commit for more than 2 years. Somehow it's just like a year and a half, and then people have moved on. That's the challenge. Otherwise, scaling is not so difficult, right? The solution we know works across geographies. So you need to send a person from maybe a team of two people from here who are trained in the process, and they go to a new geography, and and start implementing. So it's called the Boatram. You do baseline assessment. Also, we have an app, by the way. So all of this is standardized. We have we've used technology to help us make sure that whatever is happening in these different locations is as standardized as possible. We're following a system and a process. We're getting data and we're analyzing data, and our decisions are based on data. So we have teams that are able to go and do baseline assessments, hire locally for additional ground support that you need. Uh, Baseline assessments, onboarding and orientation, training and route mapping. So all of that is a system that's there. What you need is a stable and passionate and committed top management, uh, and of course the field. And so our field team and mid management really is committed and passionate. What we are currently struggling with is top management, having uh, you know senior program managers, CXOs kind of commit and stay on long enough. If you have that, then it's really easy to scale, because this doesn't require too much of our solution is not capital heavy. It's a system solution. It's like people need to be trained in how to think and how to apply the solution, how to build a system, and then they're able to do that. So what we need is people who are interested in this and who commit to it. And I think that is the key to being able to scale, if you can find the right team. And honestly, that's been a struggle. So we've scaled so far, which is not bad. And I don't think there's any project that's kind of failed or been a disaster. We've managed and managed well, and we have the same um, partners working with us repeatedly. And we don't, funny thing, we don't have a marketing manager, so everything's kind of going through word of mouth. But I think we need to get more people and in place at the top management level. And that's the key to, I think, being able to scale effectively. And also you need to decide how much you want to scale. I think that is a constant discussion between my co-founder Gauri Mirashi and me. There are opportunities everywhere, but uh, bandwidth is something that we need to think about. And often bandwidth we think of in terms of time, like how much time do we have. But bandwidth is also in terms of, this is a realization that I've had lately. It's also in terms of emotions. We don't realize how much emotional space our work takes up.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think to scale, having a really good top management team, overall a team, that's what is crucial. And then sky's the limit, really.
Wow. Okay. No, now that we are talking about challenges, I would love to just go on further on that note and ask you what, like, in as an entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur, in fact, in the development sector, what are some of the challenges that you have faced, and how have you actually managed to tackle them?
So there are of course a bunch of challenges, and you tackle some and then you navigate around the others, and then some you just keep banging your head against until you
Yeah.
figure it out. Um, so, so like I said, main challenge, I would say, if I really just had to say one thing that's kind of um, that we're really struggling with, is finding the right top management, like the right senior program managers,
Yeah.
COOs, CEOs, kind of thing, and having them stay. So it takes you, in our space, you don't get people trained in what we're doing, right? Because it's so unique. There's no course, so there's
Yeah.
nothing out there to teach you this. So it's kind of what we've built. So when someone joins, it takes us 6 months at least to train them, to show them how to make the connections, and even for everyone to get a grasp on things. Another 6 months to kind of get better and be able to do the work themselves, and then at least a year or 2 years of really working on projects. But what we found is people, after a year and a half, they're ready to move on to a bigger city. mostly our top management comes from external cities, so like from other places. So I think that that has been the major challenge, getting top management to commit. um and the reason they move on is not even better pay or anything, maybe a little bit of that, but just it's time now. 1.5 years to 2 years is the max we can spend in a place, and I think that that is the major challenge. Apart from that, I think personally, neither Gauri nor I have any background training experience in business plan making, in management. Everything we've learned is kind of we've learned on the job, and so I think that's a bit of a struggle. Like, it's a huge learning curve for us, and it's been a challenge, but we're working through it. Apart from that, I guess I don't know. I think I should mention that the gender dynamic really is rife. It's just there. I'm not complaining. I'm just kind of saying, like, if we are to list challenges, I think it needs to be listed in there. Um, can it be navigated? Yes, it can be, but that doesn't mean it's not a challenge. It is. So yeah, I think I'll just list those.
Yeah, yeah. I think there are a lot of listeners who are also battling the fear of starting something of their own.
Hmm.
Having had this journey of 7, 8 years, but starting with that one point where you had to take a call to start something of your own, what is some of the advice that you would like to give people who are thinking of starting something of their own, something they're motivated to do, and especially around how to battle the fear of not getting, let's say, funding, operating with minimal resources, all the challenges they may face around just the failure of an initiative and the impact that may have on their career or personal life or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, I would say, the first thing would be to know whether what you're trying to offer uh, is actually going to whether it's actually needed or not, whether there's a demand for it. I mean, that's how I would look at it. What, and I really hope we have so many challenges around us, right? And the thought or the action of fixing these challenges needs to be seen as a career opportunity, and needs to be seen our education kind of hasn't caught up with this reality of ours. So I mean, I always want to encourage people to look at these challenges that are around us in whichever space, right? In anything, in design, in whatever, you can see it everywhere, that we have these gaps, and if we can find ways to fill these gaps, or to do things differently, that really will offer something unique and offer something that people will want, or the system will want, then I think that's definitely going to work.
What, like, when you reflect back on your journey, we talked about your work in Andaman and Nicobar, we talked about your journey in Young India Fellowship. What are some of the other key learnings or key experiences that, when you reflect back, left you with the most amount of learning and kind of continue to contribute to the work that you're doing? I know I'm also very intrigued in knowing about your experience with the Acumen Fellowship, because I think a lot of young people just starting their entrepreneurial journey or in the middle of their entrepreneurial journey are also very interested in applying for the fellowship.
So it's interesting that you should ask me about the learning journey, right? So 2 3 years into our work, we knew that we had to kind of go out there and learn more. Apart from what we were doing with our work and with waste management, we had to find out different ways of learning. Because when I was at the Young India Fellowship, I think I learned a lot, and in that 1 year, it was immensely powerful that year, from learning really how to I think I learned how to really read, and to read, to grasp, things like that. We were taught how to write. I think my writing skills improved immensely. We had these courses on group dynamics, how we interact with each other, what we pay attention to, what we miss, how others interact with you, how you think yourself when you have, it was immensely useful, the Young India Fellowship. I also learned that I work better in teams. You learn a lot about yourself when you're in these kind of learning environments. So I'm all for these fellowship programs. And then 3 years, and then 5 years later, I did the Acumen, which is also when I felt like I needed to go out there. Acumen, and there was Unlimited India. I also got through to that. And both of these really contributed in different ways, right? At Acumen, which was more based on leadership and kind of moral leadership, I learned about concepts like adaptive leadership. And, that really helped describe in a way what we were doing, and the kind of the tools that we were developing. They were adaptive, that were then becoming technical. It was really interesting to be able to be guided towards these scholarly articles, and to be guided through them, so you could put words to what you were experiencing and what you were learning, and understand it better. So I think the whole adaptive leadership versus technical leadership and adaptive challenges was very powerful. I still use it a lot. Um, then also managing polarities. How do you do that, right? Because our world is full of complexities, and again, our education really doesn't ready us for this. It doesn't ready us for teamwork. It doesn't ready us for being able to work with the various interests of various groups that are kind of involved in almost every government, every government service out there, everything around us actually. So being able to kind of dismantle all of that, how do you call it, unpack that, look at it, and then work with it. I think that's what programs like the Acumen Fellowship do. And I think that the fact that the gender dynamic is rife, and that was one of the things that was holding us back. Because when we started off, Gauri and I, we were like, I don't know why we decided that we wouldn't accept that there is some gender dynamic out there, that it wouldn't affect us, and we'll pretend that it doesn't exist, and we'll go forward. And then very soon we found ourselves, like, not able to kind of hitting our head against the glass ceiling. um and we didn't realize what was happening until we had these discussions in these groups, and we realized, oh yeah, okay, it really is the gender dynamic. So being able to see things more clearly, being able to name things that you're experiencing, being able to have different lenses through which you can look at the same problem, I think is crucial, and is what we got from a lot of these programs. Apart from, when you're kind of working on something and you're in a smaller city or town, or maybe wherever, even in a bigger place, kind of gets lonely. So meeting other people who are doing similar work, or who are kind of along the same journey, kind of helps. It's a community thing. It works. And then you can share your challenges, vent. And this thing of not finding really good top management people to commit, stay on, you train them and they move on, whatever. These are challenges across organizations. So yeah, so I think that was very useful. And I still draw from things I learned, from my Shakespeare and the World class at YIF. This whole thing of being excited with complexity, and how things that are too simple are kind of almost boring. I think I got that from that course, at YIF. So really, I think these learning opportunities, when they come your way, you grab them, and be grateful for them, and make the most of them, and then pay it forward whenever you get the chance to. I think that's what I've learned.
Sounds wonderful, Natasha. You almost made me regret not doing the Young India Fellowship myself. But
Mm.
going forward, I think another thing that I got from the entire journey and the entire reflections, and I've been part of a few fellowships myself. Another thing that I keep going back to is the cohort that and the network we built and the community we built. You were talking about the whole learning and just also the sense of companionship during acumen fellowship. Do you also find some merit in going back to these cohorts, or do you also find some strength, maybe network or whatever else, in the cohorts that you were part of during these fellowships? What's the experience with that?
Yeah, 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 definitely. The network matters, and not just with regards to work, but like, you know, it adds a new dimension to your life. So I think these fellowships are really powerful that way.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
wonderful.
mean, I could go on about things, but I think the network is really it's immensely valuable, and not just for what it could bring to your organization. I don't know if I've, like, as an organization, we've specifically benefited from the network, maybe a little, I don't know, but as a person I've benefited a lot.
Okay, okay. Uh, Before moving to my next set of questions, what I would also like to ask you, given people like us working with government stakeholders, and you work with government stakeholders at different level, whether it be workers of municipal corporations to middle level bureaucrats, IAS officers to district magistrate to even CM offices. Uh, what have been some of your key learnings in the experience, like just working with government stakeholders and engaging with government stakeholders, the do's and don't, like I wouldn't want you to share a list of do's and don'ts, but just generally some key learnings on how to actually tackle that, build that network and engaging with government stakeholders.
Sure. Yeah, so I think that's working with the governments, with government stakeholders, somehow some is seen as this very opaque, this very almost scary aspect, right? And I don't think many B schools or these programs really focus on that aspect, whereas the government affects our lives, our children's lives all the time in every way. So I really think people need to open up their minds and decide that they're going to go and work with the government in whichever capacity, either as contractors, or join the services, or NGOs or whatever. I think we really, 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 really have to engage with our local government bodies. And everyone, when they think of government, think of central government and state government, right? People kind of forget that really the key decision makers, or the things that are going to affect your and my lives, are decided by councillors, like and municipal commissioners. So or even gram panchayats if you're living in a rural area. So understanding that, knowing that, and interacting with that, and working with the various dynamics in play is essential, and it's possible. And if we can do it, anyone can. Um, and I can tell you, there are lots of people in the government looking and waiting for solutions and wanting to build those solutions. So there are complexities of corruption, and all the stuff that you usually associate with the government. But having I've worked equally with the government and equally with in the private space, right? With corporates and even multilateral organizations, and I feel that it's kind of equally there in all of them. The challenges, the not motivated to actually solve a problem, the bureaucracy. It's oh my god, the
Yeah,
bureaucracy in some of these multilateral organizations is
yeah.
utterly frustrating. I'd rather work with the government. So yeah, it's it's there. It's You just have to learn how to navigate it, like you navigate everything else. And I would say really people should go for it, because the way traffic is managed, the way solid waste is managed, the way our water bodies are managed, the way our schools are managed, the way our signal lights are, this is all affecting our lives, right? Our water, drinking, air quality, everything is the government's job and duty, and they're doing it. And if we can find ways to make it better, we really should. Why are more people not working in this space? And I think the only people working in this space are kind of these huge consultancies who are kind of getting in because they know how to work the ropes to get the big contracts. But I think that there is a space now for startups, and people need to start filling that space up.
Thanks. That's very encouraging. Given your work with all these stakeholders, do you also have any fun anecdotes, experiences to share? I'm sure you must. Would you like to share any?
Hmm. Oh, there would be so many.
Yeah.
I'm trying to. uh, um. I remember right at the start when we start. When the municipal commissioner told us to show how this report of yours can actually work on ground, do a pilot. And we were working in this colony of 500 households, and they had those problems of waste at street corners being burnt, and then whatever was being collected was being dumped in the garden, and then it was being picked up after 3 days. It was really a mess. And we managed to set the whole system, give them doorstep collection, segregated waste, organics being composted, dry waste being managed, not a speck of wasting anywhere. Like it was all working beautifully. And one day the safai karmachari was absent, and so Gauri and I were both there, and we were pushing the push cart. And this one old gentleman kind of says, "Hey, AMC, AMC, idhar aa, idhar aa." And we were looking at each other, and we're like, okay, he's calling us. And so, so I kind of go to him, right? Because he's an old man. And I'm like, yes. And he goes, हाँ ये जो चाराना वाला काम किया है ना वो ठीक है, ये बाराना वाला काम कब करोगे? I'm like, what is this man
Wow.
talking about? And and so he's like, all right, this waste management thing that you've done with the solid waste is fine, but when are you going to start pulling out all the grasses from the roadsides? Because what about that kachra? Like, and I didn't know whether to laugh or whether to be angry or whether to think, okay, now we need to think of a solution for roadside grasses. But that experience kind of, Gauri and I laugh about it. We did afterwards, but to think of what the Safai Karmachari goes through, even after he's worked so hard and done his job, like he's told that whatever you've done is really nothing. What about all these grass and weeds that are growing on the side of the road? There's no appreciation. But then in a way, it's also like, okay, so I don't know why I remember that, but I remember that. Um,
That's a very interesting anecdote, I think. Quite quite hilarious, and actually the entire thing about the complaints that come, I think I've also worked with government closely and as part of the government, and I remember just wondering whatever government is able to achieve with the limited human resources or whatever limitations they have, just the empathy to be able to like work as a municipal worker or as a school teacher, tackling so many issues from whatever they have to handle in
yeah.
different directives from the government. So yeah, that's wonderful. I think it's
Yeah.
as the last segment of our conversation today, Natasha. I think I would love to know more about your perspective, or maybe even get advice from you on environment, sustainability, and governance sector. I think there must be a few people listening to us today who would love to join the environment and sustainability space, but wouldn't know probably how to go about it or how to learn more about it. What would be your advice to them?
So I think, you really need to work on the ground with your hands and feet and eyes and ears to really know what is needed on the ground and what will work and what won't. I think that cannot be replaced. So you have to start with that and then build your solutions, and then maybe go into consulting or policy advisory or whatever it is. I think going into consulting and policy advisory without the on ground experience um, gives, doesn't give as deep an understanding and as effective, probably, a solution or policy recommendation that you need later. So I think a lot of people are kind of going into the consulting and the policy space in ESG, Um, and I would say that they first need to go into working on ground, and then go into consulting after they've had a 5 or 10 year experience of actually working on whatever climate change related or ESG related topic that they're passionate about, whether it's increasing forest cover or preventing pollution or just improving systems or whatever CDMs, whatever it is. I think it's absolutely crucial and key to work on the ground, work with partners, work with the government, work at. I mean, to work. I wouldn't say at scale, but like the solutions that you build should be relevant at scale. Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's not the case for everyone, but that's what I would say that the field work is irreplaceable in the ESG journey. So anyone wanting to get into that space should be and should want to not just be willing to but want to work with their hands and figure out what ground realities are and how things can change on ground and then kind of get into more
Yeah,
higher level.
that's useful advice, and I think I agree. Uh, I think one of the things I would, before we close the podcast today, I would like to know is how do you see yourself growing and your organization growing, Ecosatva growing in the next 5 or 10 years? What's the vision you have for yourself in the coming future?
That's a great question. And
It almost
honestly,
like a funder asking you. That's not the case, but yeah.
no, honestly, uh, I struggle with that. I think like I was talking about how I think I was kind of half complaining about how this the young people we hire kind of want to move on in a year and a half time to another job, and 2 years is max they'll stay. I feel like the previous generation is going to look at our generation and be like, where is your 30-year plan? What is your legacy that you want to leave behind? And I honestly have a tough time looking at 30 years or 10 years from now. I definitely want our organization to continue doing the work it's doing, to get better at what we're doing, to really keep learning from the ground and keep learning from research that's out there, improving our solutions, scaling it. I really, really want a professional management team to take it on. I want to build partnerships with other organizations to scale. I'm not a megalomaniac. I don't imagine a huge company, but I imagine meaningful partnerships. And for myself, I'm dreaming of a sabbatical at some point, if I have to be honest. Um, and I've just had another baby, and I'm looking forward to getting some time off or finding a way to balance things a lot more. Um,
Yeah.
I think that is. I'd be lying if I didn't mention this. That definitely is something that's at the top of my mind. How do I pursue all of this, do all this work that excites me, yet also have time for my family and for myself, with like it's not like my kids need me and so I want to be there for them. It's like I also need to invest in that side of myself and my life and my health and fitness. So I think like it's all of these things that I'm thinking of over the next 5 years. I uh, In the next 5 years I'll touch 40, and so I want to make sure I'm healthy. I want to make sure I've enjoyed my time, and I want to make sure that Ecosatva is has its own life and is on its own journey, and has meaningful partnerships that takes it to places where it's needed.
Yeah. I know this. Some of it sounds difficult in terms of what you're facing and everything, and I really hope for that sabbatical for you, and definitely more
Thank
power to you
you.
and your work in the
Mm.
coming future, and hope you achieve whatever you're wishing for. Before we close the episode today, Natasha, is there any podcast, any book, or anything other resource that you would like, you recently read, or something that has had an impact on you, that you would like to recommend to our listeners?
So I think I really like Robert Greene's books. I mean, I like them in the sense they sometimes I find it hard to read them because a lot of his advice, in the 48 laws of power, and is so counter what I have been brought up to believe or practice that it's almost painful to read, but it's kind of needed, to give you a different perspective on how to handle these complexities, especially as we have more, as we as our partnerships and our clients and our organizations kind of change and evolve, kind of need to grow and shed the naivete. Like you can't be naive. I don't know if I should say this, but I really think the 48 Laws of Power and some of Robert Greene's other books are interesting and effective. I would also say that they should read this research paper about adaptive leadership and adaptive challenges. It was written. I think you can just Google it and you'll find it. Know the traits of adaptive leaders. Um, I think that that's a very important resource. Otherwise, the podcast. No, I think that's about all that's coming to my mind right now.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Natasha. I think it was
Thank you.
wonderful speaking with you today. I personally have so much learnings and so much motivation. Just looking at your journey, even before I spoke with you today, I was very dazzled, and I think I'm just more dazzled now, and
Oh.
I'll continue to be dazzled. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for being so patient and kind. And thank you. Thank you. It
Thank
was
you.
enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.